Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great day so far. We've got a fantastic webinar lined up for you here today, and that webinar is 4 ways to improve your MSP by embracing automation and DevOps. My name is Andy Surivs from Altero Software, and I'm joined by Adam Bertram today. How's it going, Adam?
Hello, pretty good.
Hey, thanks for taking the time to come talk to us about automation and DevOps and all that fantastic stuff today. Really appreciate your time and insight, Adam.
No problem.
So, automation and DevOps are two of the big buzzwords in the industry today. The benefits of automation are fairly apparent to most people that look at that word and they associate it with what it is. It's a little bit less so with DevOps. It's kind of a murky topic. A lot of people look at DevOps and they think it's more of a developer thing, and to a degree it is. But there are some benefits to the concept of DevOps, some benefits that MSPs can really leverage. So what I really wanted to point out before we really start getting into our content for the day is the vast majority of this webinar is really going to be focused on the automation piece. We're going to touch on some DevOps-ish type of topics, but really from like a 10,000 foot view to kind of give you an idea of some of the tools that are available out there that can help you, and some of the processes and procedures that you can put in place inside of your own organization that can help you managing your end customers and providing your services to them ultimately. So the first thing I want to do here is I really want to cover our agenda for the day. So first thing, we're going to do some introductions of myself, of Adam, of Altero, the sponsor, and then we're going to get into really the meat and potatoes of what you're here to hear about today. We're going to talk about some common MSP headaches and how to automate some common MSP tasks. So what my goal is with sections 2 and 3 here is to really get everybody on a baseline. We understand that there are MSPs of all shapes and sizes on this webinar today. Some people starting out, some people that have been more longer in the tooth and are just kind of looking for some tips and tricks to help them. But we want to set some baselines, that way we're all on the same page as to going forward once we start getting into the later parts of the webinar. Part 3 is, like I said, is just going to be talking about some of the most common tasks that MSPs take care of and how you can automate those to kind of remove some of the headache. And then we're going to start getting into more of the DevOps territory with 4 and 5. You're going to get a quick introduction to it. We're going to talk about APIs and REST APIs more specifically, and we've got a REST API demo towards the end of that section. And then finally, we'll wrap up things and get to our Q&A. Now, one thing I want to mention about the Q&A, feel free to use the GoToWebinar questions form to go ahead and ask your question as we kind of move through the webinar. If there's a chance for us to kind of organically stop and address that question at a given time, we'll do so. Otherwise, we'll wait until that Q&A section at the end and we'll address the questions there. The other thing I want to mention is if we have so many questions that we can't address them all in the time given, we always do a follow-up blog post out on one of the Altero blogs that contains a recording of the webinar, a full list of the questions and their associated answers as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get into some of the introductions here. So again, my name is Andy Surwich. I'm a technical evangelist for Altero Software. I'm also a Microsoft MVP in the Cloud and Data Center Management competency and a VMware vExpert. I've been in the industry for 15 years now. Boy, I always am kind of surprised when I see that number. It makes me feel old. Anyway, yeah, I've been around for a while here. 11 of those years were spent working for an MSP specifically, and a mid-sized MSP at that. So very aware of the unique needs and the unique challenges that are presented in the MSP space, both technically and organizationally as well. So looking forward to kind of sharing some of that insight with you guys today. Outside of that, my main focus has always been in virtualization, cloud services, the Microsoft server stack, with an emphasis on Hyper-V and VMware. I am quite active on Twitter. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my handle's right there at @asurwich. Apologies for making you spell my last name, but there it is. And additionally, I am a frequent blogger and the chief editor of our Altero blogs. We have a Hyper-V, a VMware blog, And we also have a new MSP blog that's recently been released as well, and I'll have the URL for that a little bit later in the presentation. And Adam, I'll hand it off to you to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, thanks, Andy. As Andy said, my name is Adam Bertram, and I'm also a Microsoft MVP in the cloud and data center management piece. But unlike Andy, who is dealing directly with virtualization all the time and MSPs, my main focus is just on general automation and DevOps. So I'm an automation engineer as a full-time role, but I also do a lot of other things on the side. Like as you can see here, I've done a lot of writing, I do a lot of training, and generally everything that I do is around automation and DevOps in some particular facets. So I'm not directly focused on MSPs per se, but the skills that I have that I can provide, that I'm looking forward to providing today, really are universal across the board. And I'm looking to share some more of that knowledge with you guys. And I'm also on Twitter, so hit me up at AD Bertram, and I have a blog of Adam the Automator that I write routine blogs about all kinds of PowerShell and DevOps and just any kind of automation stuff that you may be interested in there.
All right, thanks, Adam. I want to finish up the introduction section here with just a quick word about the sponsor, Altera Software and the company that I work for. So we're a fast-growing developer of some fantastic, super easy-to-use backup software designed specifically for the SMB and the mid-market space, and MSPs that are operating in that space as well. That virtual backup solutions trusted by 40,000 plus customers and 7,000 plus partners and MSPs worldwide, and that is Altero VM Backup. If you're interested in a little bit more information about that product, go to altero.com/VM-backup for more information. So with that said, we can go ahead and start talking about automation and DevOps for the MSP. So like I said earlier, I kind of want to start with setting a baseline. So first, let's talk about some of the common headaches that MSPs have to deal with. And they are unique problems, they are troublesome problems too. And so let's kind of talk about those to begin with here. Next slide, please. So running an MSP isn't easy. Like I said, I was involved with an MSP for 11 years at various levels of that organization. Completely understand, I totally get it. Running an MSP is not easy. There are all kinds of different problems and situations that you run into that that make things difficult, right? So first off, you're managing lots of endpoints. You've got multiple customers, each with their own endpoints, their own servers, and that could amount to hundreds or even thousands of endpoints that you as the MSP are actually managing. And to complicate that even further, it's a geographically dispersed deployment, right? I mean, you're managing all these different endpoints, and you got some over here, you've got some on this side of the country, you might have others completely in a different country. That provides a lot of different challenges, right? And then if you think about that, not only from a geographical perspective, but also from a technical, from a networking perspective, you've got different or maybe even identical subnets across all of those customers. I mean, how many of your customers do you walk in to their network and they've got a 192.168 network scheme? I mean, it's very, very common. So coming up with solutions to deploy and script actions across all of those can be quite difficult. You've got limited staff. Hiring is tough, training is tough. It's hard to find the right people that fit both technically and with your culture. You get them trained up exactly how you want, and a couple of years go by and people leave, there's turnover. All at the same time, there's heavy demand for those skills going on, right? So I mean, it's difficult to get people trained up, whereas more focused on what we're talking about today, automation can kind of help that. Automation and proper documentation will make that turnover easier. Your success really depends on having low resolution times, low incidents per endpoint, generally doing more with less, right? I mean, that's, you could say that any business thrives on doing more with less, but it's especially important to MSPs with, all of their different, the different things that they're responsible for, and ultimately providing that top of the line customer service to your end customers. And next we come up to having uptime expectations. Customers demand as much uptime as possible. It used to be more accepted years ago when a customer might have some hard copies that they could work on while things were down and systems were being worked on. But that's something that isn't generally accepted anymore. The general rule of thumb is that your customers are up and running 24/7. And that can make patch cycles specifically, very difficult. It's hard to get time in to properly patch the systems, which we know with the security landscape as it is today, is really important. So, patch cycles can be made difficult because of that uptime expectation. And then finally, quick response is always expected. It's always needed. More specifically, you think about some of these out of band patches and 0 days that have come out recently. It's something that's very, very difficult. Switch my webcam on here. I forgot to do that earlier, so you can see my smiling face. But anyway, I was talking about 0 days and out of band patches. It's really important that you get those out there quickly and efficiently to your endpoints that you're managed, because your customers are expecting that, hey, you're their IT provider, you're keeping them safe. So it's very important that that's taken care of. And outside of the security perspective, sometimes you have an emergency configuration change that needs to be made. Some change that you have to get out there quickly. That kind of falls into that quick response category as well. Next slide, please. So what can you do about it? You're not completely powerless. You have lots of options. But some of them may not work for you. So the first I have on here is hire more staff. It's kind of a no-brainer. Yes, you could bring on more help, but obviously there's a cost associated with that, right? It's certainly help with the workload, but you got to pay the person, you got to provide them benefits, all that. You could take on fewer customers, and I find that there are a lot of MSPs that they have a hard time with that option. For long-term growth, that's not really something that you want to be doing. But for short-term, to kind of get through a backlog, maybe it's something that you want to consider. You could pursue less complex services. You could choose a couple of services to get really good at that are simple and easy to deploy and support. But at the end of the day, we're in IT, right? I mean, not everything is kittens and rainbows. It's not always the easiest thing to work through specific issues and provide certain services, because again, it is IT. You can utilize what's that?
Unicorns.
Unicorns. That's right. They do exist, right? You can also utilize third-party applications. A lot of larger MSPs are going to be using some sort of RMM platform, which certainly helps. But I have run into some MSPs that actually go above and beyond just an RMM platform. They'll utilize other tools that can make certain processes and functions inside of their business a little bit easier and more efficient. But finally, ultimately, more akin to what we're talking about today, you can find efficiencies with existing tool sets. And the tool set that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today, and Adam's going to spend a lot of time demoing, is PowerShell. If you think about PowerShell as a tool, it is ingrained at almost all levels of IT today. All Microsoft services have it and use it. A lot of third-party vendors are starting to build modules for their services. REST APIs that we're going to be talking about later can be pinged and queried with PowerShell commandlets. I mean, it's kind of your all-in-one scripting and automation tool that we're going to be talking about today. And really, the best part about it, it's free. It's just there. There's no additional cost for it. It's just an efficiency that you have to pick up, learn, and start using. And that's really what Adam's going to be talking about here in a second. So Adam, I'll hand it over to you, and you can walk us through that.
All righty. Well, I will do my best here. So as I mentioned early in the introduction, my primary focus is automation, and in particular PowerShell. I have taken thousands of different situations and tasks and things, and automated things with PowerShell. And I know that as an MSP, everybody kind of has those universal tasks that are either take too much time or error prone or something like that. So what does automation really mean for the MSP? So I made this slide and I made it life without automation. This is kind of what life looks like to somebody that doesn't automate. So the first one, unnecessary human error. You know, you've all had these times whenever we go to you know, provision a server, or install a piece of software, you know, run a script or anything like this. Even things like that, we're humans. We don't do things the same way every single time. Every time we do it is a little bit different. The context that we're in, you know, your family could be coming through the door if you're working from home. A coworker could interrupt you. You know, you could be sitting at your desk, have a bad day, have a good day. There's so many different variables here for us as just humans, as people that IT workers, that we're going to introduce human error a lot. Computers don't have that. Computers don't have bad days. Computers don't have good days. They just have consistent, always, all the same days. So the next thing is, it's reinventing the wheel. This is another thing that just drives me crazy. Whenever you, you know, whenever you go to perform a task, you think, I've done this before. I've done this like 50 times. Why am I right-clicking and clicking and installing the software every single time? This is ridiculous. Everybody's kind of had that feeling at some point in time where, like, I am totally wasting my time by doing this again. Why can't a computer do this? And that's what automation does. Next thing, as I touched on, was the inconsistency. With as a human, as I'm going through here and I'm performing this webinar, if I would perform this webinar 5, 10, 20 different times, it's going to be different every time. The general gist of it's going to be the same, but there's no way that I can go do word for word unless I'm reading from a script, which in that case, you know, you may make mistakes here and there, forget to do something, or, you know, something like that. And then finally, it does slow growth. So automation is all about taking care of the mundane stuff that we humans don't want to do and that a computer can do. And that if we don't automate, it really slows growth, because we're having to chuck human intervention. We're having to hire more people and utilize the people that we do have on tasks that they don't have to do. You know, all the predictable stuff that can go on in an MSP, that can all be automated away, and that way we can just build upon that, build and build and build, and then eventually we don't have to hire as much staff. We can grow faster and that sort of thing. So all around, automation is great, as long as you can kind of understand it and embrace it. So I think with that being said, I think Andy was going to talk a little bit about the some typical time-consuming tasks for MSPs.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So what we really wanted to do here was kind of pick two of the most common tasks that MSPs have to kind of take care of on a regular basis. So, you know, the two that we picked here, and by no means is this a comprehensive list. There are far more than this, but this is two of the most common. Our agent and, you know, custom XE and custom setup deployments, and then 0-day and emergency patching. I mean, those are two things that you know, if I put my MSP hat back on, those two things happened a lot. You know, we spent a lot of time doing those two things. So, you know, those are time consuming because just the sheer number of endpoints you're managing, right? And all the different geographical locations that we talked about earlier. And Adam, I think that you've put a demo together here that kind of demonstrates, you know, how you can use PowerShell and automation to kind of address these 2 points. I'll let you take it from here.
Yep, thanks, Andy. So yeah, as Andy said, we're going to be doing a demo now. We're going to be doing just PowerShell as an example to deploy some agents, actually Ultra VNC in this case, just to have a placeholder there. And we're also going to look into deploying some patches. All right, so hopefully this looks okay. Andy, can you see my demo screen here?
I can, yep, looks good.
All right, great. All right, so to start this off, we are just going to be using PowerShell and PowerShell only for these tasks. Now, PowerShell, as Andy said, has a really good is a really good way to automate all kinds of different tasks. But PowerShell is a scripting language. You need to know how to do it. So if you don't know anything about PowerShell, you know, some of this may be a little over your head, but you don't have to be an expert by any stretch of the imagination. So the first demo that I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to be representing a typical situation to where you have a hotfix and you want to deploy it out to a bunch of machines. So at this point, I'm assuming that that you're already on a machine, maybe at a client site, a jump server that is typical that you can then jump off of and then grab and manage a lot of other endpoints while you're there. So the first thing I wanted to show you is when, let's say you have a hotfix for Microsoft that you need to get deployed as soon as possible. I mean, even it could be a hotfix, it could be really anything. You'll see that the structure that I'm building this out can apply to just about any software installer that you want. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've chosen Silverlight here as an example because Silverlight shows up as an update that I need on my Server 2016 boxes that I'll be deploying it to. But instead of, I'm lazy, and instead of, I don't want to go to a browser and download this thing, PowerShell has a command called invoke web request. Invoke web request allows you to go out to any URL, query it, download all of the text on the page. In this example, it's a file. So I can just point the invoke web request at a URI, which is just my Silverlight _x64 exe file, and then I can download it. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to copy that out, and then I'm going to download it to my test box here. So you can see here that it just goes through and tells you the number of bytes written. That just, it's writing that output to a file. So once I do that, I can download it. Again, it doesn't have to be a patch. It can be just about anything you want. So I didn't have to go to a browser. I didn't have to do anything like that. Then once I have that patch downloaded, I can then go to and use the Get Windows Update command here. And the Get Windows Update command comes from a community module called PS Windows Update. This is another great thing about PowerShell. There's so many different modules out there that not only vendors have created to manage their software and their various services. There's hundreds and hundreds of community modules out there. More specifically, they're out there on the PowerShell gallery. If you're not familiar with the PowerShell gallery, it's a repository of hundreds of PowerShell modules that have already been built that do all kinds of stuff. So in this instance, I use Get Windows Update, part of that PS Windows Update module, and I pointed at another server that I have on my lab. And you can see here that it says I need 3 updates. And one of them is the Microsoft Silverlight KB here, so 402.33.07. So now I want to go into and actually install that. Now, PS Windows Update has an install Windows Update command to it, but as I was working through some of my demos, that it doesn't really work as you expect a lot of the times, and it can be pretty slow. If you're just doing one update, it's really slow because it has to go through the scan, figure out what you need and all that stuff. But if you know what you need ahead of time, like maybe the Spectre meltdown patch or something like that, you have a specific KB you want to get out there, it's a lot easier just to pull it down and then deploy it out yourself. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do here. So now once I know that I have the patch, then I'm going to deploy it. And I'm going to use a script that I created. I'll show you how I do that in a minute here, but I've built a PowerShell script, and you can see I'm specifying the computer name. It's actually, I'm specifying 2 computer names, my 2 client servers that I have set up. I'm specifying the installer file path, which is just the path to the exe that I just downloaded, and the installer arguments of /q. So you may notice this looks similar to just any general software that you would create. In actuality, this doesn't have to be a patch. Like I said, this can be any exe as long as you know you have the installer and you know the installer arguments to install it silently. This will work just the same. So I'm going to let this go for a minute, and then I'm going to open up the script here and show you what it's doing. So here is the script to deploy Windows patch. And it's a pretty simple script. It just has 3 parameters: computer name, installer file path, and installer arguments. And in here, you'll see that I have this for each loop. So I'm looping through every one of those computers. I specified 2. I could specify 10, 20, or 100 at once, and it's going to do the same thing. This is the great thing about automation, because if you can define how to do something one time with one particular machine, you can easily just multiply that by however many numbers you want, and it'll do the exact same thing across all of them. In this case, I'm copying the file, the installer file, over to each of these machines, and then afterwards, I'm running a command called invoke command, which goes out. It's kind of like PS exec if you're not familiar with it. Goes out to the machine, invokes a certain file, and runs it. In this case, I am running start process on that remote machine, and that allows me to start it and pass the /q all the right parameters that I needed to. So this is a really simple script. Now, this script is pretty basic, and it runs in serial too. This is one thing that you may or may not run into. If you're a big MSP and you have a lot of endpoints out there, you have like 1,000 endpoints you need to push a patch to. This may not be the right way. You can utilize this code, but you're going to utilize it for one, put it in a script, and then use that tool to push out this code to a bunch of machines. That's kind of what I call automation orchestration. So right now we're kind of doing everything in one. It's going in serial. So every one, it starts the patch install in one, waits, then starts the patch install in the other one. You could see how long that would take. So it looks like the patch did get installed on the 2 machines. So now I want to go over here, and then I'll bring up my demos script again, and we'll see what this looks like. So now I can just run this again, and I'm doing this stuff manually. I've automated some things, but I'm doing some things manually just to show you. But in a script, you can do whatever you want. If I were doing this for real in the real world, I would probably have that get Windows update in a script, see if it exists, and if it already exists, then don't do anything. You can build all this logic that you need and really do just about anything you want. As you can see, we're going to be doing, messing with APIs, files, folders, registry keys, Windows updates. Regardless of what it is, I guarantee you that a PowerShell can get to it one way or another. And you can see there that we ran get Windows update again on that remote machine, and it didn't. It's not there anymore. And I can do the same thing on the client server too, and it will not show up as well. So the next thing was, that's kind of an example of what you can do with a patch. Now the next example is pretty similar, but because we're still using an exe, we're just going to deploy an exe to a bunch of machines. Next thing I want to do is I want to deploy VNC. Maybe you have, maybe you use VNC just to quickly remote to some client computers, and you want to deploy it out to a few, or you want to update it or something like that. You can easily build a script in PowerShell to do that for you. So again, I've created a script here just called deploy VNC, and then I will go ahead and run this. And then, okay, well, forgot my my demo folder here. Let me come back here and add this. This is one thing about scripting. Sometimes, it's code, so it's going to do exactly what you tell it to do. You figure it out the right time the first time, and then after that, you don't have to worry about it again. That's the beauty of automation. You fix it once, just like I did here, and then after it's fixed, you don't have to worry about it again. You just kind of reap the benefits over and over and over again. So in this instance, it's a little bit different. I'm kind of doing the same thing like I was with a patch, but in this instance, I'm deploying them all at once. Now, this probably isn't the right way to do this if you're doing like 1,000 machines at once. If you're deploying an agent to a bunch of machines all at one time, because you're going to run into a lot of different weird connection authentication issues and things like that. But for small deployments, 5, 10, 20, even 50 machines, you could use just PowerShell. You don't even need an additional tool to do this. What this does was it uses PowerShell jobs. And you can see here that from the verbose output that it starts the deployment job on the server 1, server 2, and then it just waits. It waits for all the computers to finish. So it invokes that installer across all the machines that you targeted at once. And then when it's done, it's just going to wait and wait and wait. So just to show you a little bit about what that script looks like, this one's a little more complicated, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So in this instance, it's generally the same thing, but notice here we have that for each loop, grabbing each of those machines. And then after that, we are again using the copy item here to copy the folder. In this instance, I had to use the installer and a silent install INF file. So every piece of software is going to be a little bit different. You could have arguments. You have to create a silent install file. It just all depends. As long as you can figure out how to do it once, then you can easily just replicate that over and over again. And in this instance here, that I instead use the script block to do this, and inside of the script block, I put all that start process in there. And then this is the big one here. I used invoke command, but then down here I used start job. So I needed, with PowerShell as a concept, all these background jobs. And a background job is essentially just a way for you to package a bunch of code together and then run it, and then immediately give you access, give you console access again to do whatever you want. It frees up the PowerShell engine to do something else. So I could have kicked off 1,000 machines on this if I wanted to, and it would have just went starting. It would go as fast as it can start each of those jobs, but it wouldn't wait on any of that stuff. It would just execute it, and then since I have this little while loop here, it would then say, okay, find all of the jobs that equal the state of running. If there's anything, what this says is that if there's anything that's left, then just start sleep, which is just pause for 5 seconds, try again, pause for 5 seconds, try again, pause for 5 seconds. And then finally down here, I'm just receiving the job, which just receives some of the output that the job is doing. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. And then I'm doing some cleanup after the fact. So this does sort of the similar thing. What you'll see is, like, it doesn't really matter if it's a patch, if it's an agent, if it's a whatever you want, as long as you can figure out how to silently install that package once, you can easily replicate that across a lot of different machines in one. All right, so yeah, all right, so that concludes the demo here, and let me go back to the slides here, and then the next one was we're going to talk about DevOps for the MSP, and I think Andy's going to take over for me a little bit here and explain more about that.
Yep, thanks, Adam. Great demo there, by the way. So yeah, first thing I want to do here, once we get to the DevOps section, is again kind of reiterate that this is by no means a comprehensive overview of what DevOps is. This is, again, kind of a 10,000-foot view of just some very basic, high-end DevOps concepts that can kind of provide some value, through the lens of the conversation we're having today about automation. So, we've seen all these different methods, and we've talked about these different ways to, kind of apply and do things with all your customers' endpoints, right? But, thinking about how many endpoints that you're touching there, with great power comes great responsibility, right? And these are just some things that you need to consider. Again, if you're applying these scripts to multiple endpoints, I mean, if there's something wrong with said script, you could potentially cause a lot of breakage there, right? So really, one of the things that DevOps, that whole mentality kind of brings to the table is this ecosystem of accountability, consistency, and providing proper documentation and bug checking. I think, when we're talking about this, the two most important boxes here, I think, are the bug checking and the proper documentation. And I have proper in quotations because I've seen a lot of documentation out there that, okay, yes, it's officially documented, but it's not good documentation, or it's hard to find. And again, we're talking about deploying these scripts across multiple endpoints. You got to make sure these scripts are tested properly, they're vetted, so that kind of plays into the whole bug checking part of things, right? And I think Adam, he's got a tool, or a couple of tools here that he's going to demo that will kind of help with some of these ideas and help you responsibly apply some of that automation into your day-to-day operations. I think the next slide is off to you there, Adam.
Yep. Okay, so yeah, so taking that what we just talked about to a new level here is more of the DevOps concept. So previously, we were working with a PowerShell script. I created it, I saved the script on the server, and I executed. I could do that one or many times, it doesn't matter. But when you start to get into talking about DevOps, you can't really talk about DevOps without talking about software development. That's where it came from. Actually it was borrowed. The term was borrowed from the car manufacturing industry, Toyota in particular. So these concepts are kind of borrowed all along the way, and one of them is the crux of DevOps is the very first rung, if you want to call it a DevOps ladder, is source and version control. So again, I wanted to show you what life was without source control. So if you're not familiar with source or version control, this is a concept that allows you to, if I had that script that I was using and I needed to change it, and I could just change it on a whim, and it would have probably worked because it was simple. Well, what if that script is 100 lines long, and that change that I made affects this change up here, or it affects this change up here? I don't know about all these things. I save it. Maybe I make a bunch of changes and I save it again, and then I just start hitting Control Z, Control Z, Control Z because it's messed up. I want to get back to that previous state, but I may have closed out of the editor or whatever I was having to do, and at that point, you're screwed if you don't have a backup of it. Source control or version control, on the other hand, allows you to check in things. It allows you to check in code, and it could be a script, it could be a C++ application, it could be any kind of code, it could be even just a text file with your instructions to go to the gym or something. I don't know if I don't really need that, but anyway, so the gist of it is version control. You can track different versions, and one of the most popular products to do that is Git. And what Git does, it eliminates a lot of the stuff like the file names here. So thing.back, thing.back2. We all have these .back, whatever things because that's our kind of rudimentary way to do version control. And another good thing about Git and GitHub in particular is, at this point with Git, there's only one person working on code at once. I'm just envisioning, somebody sitting there at a computer, not, talking with anybody, maybe in a dark basement or something, and just kind of just coding away, checking in stuff to Git, using, they can revert old versions and stuff that they screwed up. But you're not really sharing that code with other people. You kind of take it to the next level whenever you start kind of evangelizing, like, look at this cool stuff that I did. We need to all work on this together. So that's what the product called GitHub does. GitHub is an extension of the Git version control system. And GitHub actually takes Git and allows you to sync all these little, what they call repositories on everybody's computer, and syncs it up to a central place so that other people can collaborate on it. They can do all kinds of things like contribute to your scripts or your project or whatever kind of automation thing you're doing. Open up issues, tell you have this bug here, can we fix that? GitHub is one of the leading providers of social coding, I guess, if you will, out there in the open source world. So yeah, as I said, I talked about this a little bit about already with GitHub, but what the biggest thing that I didn't refer to that I'm going to go in a demo about is it is a great source of a build and release pipeline. This is automation at its greatest when it comes to taking software or even just a single script, if you wanted to, taking it through this pipeline of steps that checks it into version control. Then you run all these tests on it. You build all these tests to think, well, did the script do what it was supposed to do? Does the code look okay? Did the changes that I check in to Git and goes up to GitHub, did it do as I expected? Did I break anything? Did it introduce bugs? And then eventually you take this all the way over and you actually can deploy that out to machines. For an MSP, what I'm going to show you here is you can essentially take a bunch of scripts that you have and maybe you want to just deploy these PowerShell scripts on a client jump server. So maybe you have some engineers that periodically VPN into a client, and that you need to deploy, provision, I mean, whatever you want to do with PowerShell. You have the ultimate freedom there to do whatever you need to. So this build and release pipeline takes things from GitHub, and then it builds it along, runs tests on the code, and then does something to it, deploys it. In this case, we're going to deploy it onto a client site or a client jump server. So to do that, I'm going to kind of go through the basics, kind of an overall view of, not necessarily, I'm not going to do this in PowerShell because that would just throw you for a loop. We could, but this isn't what I would recommend building this whole thing out in PowerShell. We have to use other tools, and GitHub is a free tool that you can use, and AppVeyor is free as well. So you can put both of these together and start using these today. So let me show you a little bit about what I'm talking about here. So let's go back over to my demo. All right. So the first thing I want to do here is let's go to a module. So I have a PowerShell module that I have created. Let's see here. Open up Chrome, called PSAD Sync. So this is just a PowerShell module that has a particular, that's associated with a repository. So I have a Git repository on my local machine here, and I've synced this up to GitHub. And this is freely available for anyone. Anyone can go to the my repo here and download this and start using it. And this module, it consists of a few different files. You know, the module itself, the manifest, all the artifacts that it takes to do this, to do whatever I want. In this case, this is just doing some syncing between CSV files and Active Directory. But I've built this out publicly in a way that others can download it, can contribute, and can open bugs. You can see I have 4 issues open. Somebody has filed some issues for me that I need to fix. And it's just a good way to collaborate on these things and share the code and be able to, you know, to social about code. You know, you're not perfect. You're not going to write even if you're the best PowerShell scripter in the world or the best developer in the world, you're never going to write perfect code. It's really, I really like about GitHub. So this is the GitHub repository that I have for this PowerShell module that I had created. So next, I want to show you the AppVeyor product. So I want to get that PowerShell module to my client site. So in this case, I just want to be able to share this module with my clients so that they can use it, that I can use it when I'm on site, or if I log in remotely. I just want to be able to build a way that I can write code on my system here, hit check-in, and then automatically go through all the process and get distributed to the client site, to the client server, without any intervention on my part. Again, you can build pipeline, you can do just about anything you want. It's all about an automated pipeline all the way through to the client site. So this is a product called AppVeyor, and AppVeyor is a build automation tool. And AppVeyor allows you to write a bunch of PowerShell scripts, or a lot of different Python. There's a few different other options in there to write the instructions. Is what it takes of doing tests on my code. Where do I deploy it to? What do I do with it? This sort of thing. And this is what the AppVeyor command, or what the AppVeyor service looks like. And I'm just going to run through quickly what this is going here. So first off, I am going to just do a quick change. So using the PowerShell gallery, I have the PSAD Sync module in the PowerShell gallery, which is freely available to the communities. Anybody in the world can go to run find module PSAD Sync, and then notice that it's at 1.2.62 here. So I'm at 1.2.62 for this particular version. You can see the repository is PS Gallery, so it's in the PS Gallery. I want to write code and then have it automatically run tests against my code, make sure it's all working right, and then automatically go to the PowerShell gallery. So that's what I'm going to do. So the next thing I want to do is I want to show you, I'm going to actually check this in here real quick. So I'll open up PSAD sync. I think it's in my Git repos here. And then I'm just going to change something. I don't know. It doesn't really matter what to change. I'm going to open up the module here. And I'll just, I don't know, add something here. It doesn't matter. I made a change. I can save it. And there's a number of different ways to do this, but I sometimes use the GitHub desktop client. So notice that it sees that I changed it automatically. I didn't have to tell it that I changed it at all. Then I'm going to say change some stuff, which I don't recommend doing. It's usually good to be descriptive about these sort of things. Commit to master. That commits it to Git. That's the repository that's local on my system. You notice how fast it was. That was all local. To push that up to GitHub, then I go sync here. And it's just going to take a second. That change is going to go up to GitHub, just that single file. And then what you'll notice is AppVeyor, notice how that automatically went away, and it says change some stuff here. I didn't do anything to this. And then it says we're now going to be at 1.2.63. With any build automation tool, it's going to queue up. So a build automation tool typically has an agent queue. It has all these jobs that can build up that are shared amongst a team, amongst a lot of different people, and it's going to queue up for a while. While it's queuing up, I want to show you some of the output that it has here, so we don't have to wait a few minutes for it. So it looks like the last time I did this was a day ago, and the build took 1 minute and 15 seconds. When I look at this build output, you'll see that I've built a lots of different scripts, and it's going to do a lot of different things. You know, if you're familiar with Pester, the PowerShell testing framework, it downloads Pester, it downloads a module called PS Postman, one of mine that I've built, and then it's going to run through a bunch of different tests. You see all this green is good, green is good, test, test all these different things, even if I just changed another thing. This is how you build reliable scripts and reliable code. And then you get down at the bottom and it says build success. And once the build is successful, in this instance, I've got the build set up to publish automatically to the PowerShell gallery. And once it runs through all those different options, it's then going to publish out to the PowerShell gallery, which then gives my client or me or whoever on the internet the ability to just do find module, install module, and pull it down. Now this could be, you don't have to have, since all these scripts are in PowerShell, the build scripts are in PowerShell especially. I'm not going to go into too much detail. We might be running low on time, but the build scripts, see, they're just PowerShell scripts again. You can use PowerShell in all kinds of different scenarios. In this instance, I'm just running PowerShell to install some requisite modules in the build. I use PowerShell to do the publish step. So I'm using publish PM module here to push that out to the PowerShell gallery. PowerShell, you can use script out about just about anything you can think of. So let's hope that just starts going pretty soon. It depends on how busy the AppVeyor service is, but this is going to queue for a little bit. And since I'm not going to wait on it, this could be a couple of minutes. It could be, you know, up to 5 or 10 minutes sometimes, but I'm not going to wait on it. But what I was going to do is I was going to say, whenever you run find module again, after it goes through all that and publish it to the gallery, then you'll see 1.2.63. It'll increment it. So it has a versioning system in there. So that's kind of a very high level overview of what the a build pipeline is. And again, the build pipeline is more of a development topic, but I'm not a developer. You know, I'm probably more of a developer now than I am an IT pro these days. But what I really want to stress with this is, if you're in an MSP and you're listening to this webinar, you might not be a developer per se. You have maybe you're an IT pro, an engineer, somebody like that, and you just want to fix stuff that you know, that you have problems with. You don't have to be a developer to understand DevOps and the concepts and how all of that works. I think in this day and age, it's really important that you do so, because you can see that by leveraging automation, I can deploy all that stuff, and I could have deployed an agent like I with that. I could have, you know, deployed a patch, whatever you want. So that's kind of the overall gist of automating a build and release pipeline. So with that, I'll go ahead and give it over to Andy, and he's going to show you a little bit, explain a little bit about APIs and in more particular how the REST API works with PowerShell.
All right, thanks, Adam. That was some really cool stuff, and the whole source control I think is really valuable to MSPs that are really starting to consider automation. So
yeah, definitely. If you write a lot of code, you have to have source control.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, well, to build a little bit further on what we've talked about so far, where do you take it to the next step now? You know, we've automated some of the core processes using some of the core technologies, you know, inside of our networks. How do you take it a little bit further? And I felt like we should spend a little time talking about APIs and REST. APIs, and specifically REST APIs, really allow you to extend your automation to third-party applications, and really provides a lot of benefits. So if you can advance the slide real quick, Adam. Thank you, sir. So really you could think of, you know, an API as, you know, kind of a front door, you know, to the outside world. You know, really when you're talking about REST API specifically, you know, they're accessed via HTTP and HTTPS, and really it allows you to ping and query a server, you know, and pull bits of information out of it and conduct certain operations as well. And what I'm going to show you in this demo here is utilizing a REST API with Altero VM Backup. You know, I just happen to work for a software vendor, and we just happen to have a REST API, and I figured that would be a good example of how you can provide some automation with a third-party software application.
Yeah, the big thing I like about APIs especially is like just like within that slide that you have that an API is like the front door to an application. You know, you have, it could be Altero VM Backup, it could be AppVeyor, it could be GitHub, it could be a cloud service, it could be really whatever. I really like an API because you can integrate it. You know, it's kind of like the whole IFTTT thing, how that service works. It allows you to kind of automate all these different services. APIs are a very cool concept.
Exactly, exactly. And yeah, I can demo that real quick, Adam, if you can make me presenter real quick.
Oh, yeah, I can do that here. All right. Hopefully Perfect. That worked.
It did, thank you, sir. And you should be able to see my screen now.
Yep.
All right, so I have put together a script here real quick that utilizes Altero VM Backup's REST API. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time going through every single section of the script here, but basically what we're doing here is we're doing some housekeeping items here. For my own use in my lab, I was having the script check the execution policy of PowerShell. I was checking to make sure the correct version of PowerShell was available. I set some credentials here, you know, you see my super secret password here and everything. As we get on the list, you can see I'm defining, okay, where does this API live? And for simplicity's sake, I'm actually accessing the API on the machine it's running on. So I just set everything to localhost. And if we scroll down a little bit further, I'm doing a number of different things here. So we don't want just anyone using our API. So the first thing that we need to do with our API is we need to generate a session token. Once we have a session token, we can send that session token through with other commands to the REST API that allow us to do things. So that's what this first block of code here is doing, is we're grabbing that session token. And as we move down further into the script, I have got some logic here that it makes sure that we actually received a session token. If we didn't, it stops the script and says, hey, you know, you didn't get a session token, try again, check for problems, et cetera, et cetera. Now here is where we actually do something with the API. Now for the purpose of this demo, I just am retrieving a list of backup schedules. That's all I'm doing with this. So you can see here that we're actually querying this address. So the local host address I defined above, plus we're tacking on this schedule string to the URL that we're accessing. Now here is the secret sauce, invoke REST method. This is the PowerShell command that allows you to actually use a REST API. So we use invoke REST method, we pointed at the URL that or the URI that we put together, and then we're actually using a specific, you know, a specific method. In this case, we're doing get. There are a couple of different things that you can do with a REST API, but when you use a GET method, you're saying, hey, API, give me something. And that's what we're doing in this case. So if I run this script, what it's going to do is I've got some verbose messages throughout the script here too. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get a session token, and then we're going to report back what the session token is. And then using that session token, we're going to fetch that backup schedule information, and it's going to spit it out in JSON format. Once that's done, we do some housekeeping. We clean up the session token, purge it, and then the script is over. But as you can see here, we've returned a list of the schedules. We've got a weekdays at 3 o'clock. We've got another schedule here for daily at 4 o'clock, follow up with an offsite copy. You can see the schedule type, whether it's a backup and offsite copy, sandbox restore, all kinds of different things. Now, you're not limited with our API to just getting information. We have a documentation site, altero.com/API will get you here, where you can come in, you can actually see all the different things that you can do with our REST API. So the one thing that I was going to show real quick is if you go all the way down here to virtual machines, because we primarily back up virtual machines, and you come down here to, this is a post method, so we're actually doing something, we're changing something. You can expand this out and you can see all the implementation notes. You can say, oh, this particular method allows you to add a virtual machine to backup. So if you think about deployment mechanisms, if you're deploying a new VM, you can tack this code on to the end of that deployment script to automatically have the VM added to backup and the first backup executed. So it really adds some options there for automation and automating all facets of your environment. So with that, I'm going to head back to the slide deck here, and we are just about out of time, so we're going to get through here to the end. Let me swap the presenter view there. Okay. So I'm going to give Adam a second or two to kind of look at the questions that have been asked so far. If you haven't asked your question yet and you have one, be sure to get it in using the questions form. While Adam's looking at those questions, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the Altero VM Backup for MSPs program. So if you're an MSP and you're interested in providing backup as a service offering using our product, we have a program for that. It's designed to be multi-tenant. We've got a great tool called the Cloud Management Console that allows you to monitor and manage your backups across your entire customer base. And really, that's an unbeatable value. So this is my slide deck I was using for our EU webinar earlier this morning, but we have a really, really low cost for the industry here, and that is pay $5 per VM per month. It's one of the most accessible prices in the industry. You can start small and really cancel anytime. And we don't have any commitments either, so you don't have to sign any long-term commitments or anything like that, which is really helpful. And really, you get full access to our solution. There's no barriers. You get all the bells and whistles. If you're interested in a little bit more information about that product and the MSP program specifically, go to altero.com/MSP. And just so this kind of covers some of the stuff I mentioned already. You get the Cloud Management Console, and you get the Unlimited Plus, again, all the bells and whistles of our application. So I was going to do a quick demo of the CMC, but we're pretty strapped for time, and I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. So 2 other slides I want to mention really quick. If you're interested in more information about that Cloud Management Console and managing backup as a service offerings with that console, we have another webinar coming up with Matt, who's head of our help desk, who will actually walk through the Cloud Management Console and the MSP platform of Altero. So if you're interested in that webinar, you can go to bit.ly/AlteroMSPS to use to say in altero.com. The other thing I want to point out is we do have a new MSP blog out there. If you're interested in accessing some great community educational content related to MSPs, go to altero.com/MSP-dojo. We've got blogs, guides, ebooks, more webinars, all different kinds of things. We really want to foster a sense of community with this blog, and you'll get all kinds of great information there. So again, altero.com/MSP-dojo if you're interested in that. So let's get to the wrap up and the Q&A. So I think Adam has had a time to take a look at the questions here. Again, if you have a question you haven't answered yet or haven't asked yet, go ahead and use the GoToWebinar form. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and take a look at the questions. One question that I see right now is this webinar being recorded? Yes, we have recorded this webinar, and we will be sending out an email with the link to the recording, so you can watch it on your own time at a later date. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so I think we'll cover one or two questions here. So the first one being, from a time-saving perspective, it's easy to quantify the benefits of automation, but how do you help MSP owners, and more importantly, management, how do you help them quantify it from a fiscal perspective? Adam, can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I can. I've unfortunately had to have the I'm an engineer, so I've had to have the manager talk about why is this automation thing worth my time. So what I usually explain this is as far as fiscally automation really explains itself for the most part, because if you have to think about, you take one manual task, let's say it takes one manual task a person 5 hours to do. Okay, if he has to do that one time, then automation probably not a good use of their time, because you only have to do it once. If you have to do that task more than once, let's say you do that task 5 times and it takes one person 5 hours, that's 25 hours of work. Now, when you build in automation, that takes a significant amount more time than you do it manually, but you notice that return on investment over the long haul. So if it takes you to do this task 5 hours and you're going to pay an engineer $30 an hour or something, that's $1,500. And then $1,500 times 5 is, I'm terrible at math, was that $7,000, something like that. But you get the gist. So, but if you're going to automate that, let's say it takes you to automate it 10 hours to automate it. But at that point, you don't have to do anything more. It's just machine time. You just click go and run with it. At that point, your total expenditure for it is only $3,000 instead of $7,000. So it's all about routine, how many times that you perform a task, and how much does it cost to do that task once manually.
Yeah, sounds good. It's kind of got to figure the math out there, don't you? The dollars and the cents. So, all right, yep. Thanks, Adam. Another question that just popped up. I actually want to touch on this, and this will probably be the last one that we have time for. So, we've got someone who's new to PowerShell, and the first experience trying to do remote execution of a PowerShell script was that the remote PowerShell version on the endpoint they were managing was different. And they're asking, the question is, how do you keep your client's PowerShell version up to date? Now, can you use PowerShell directly for that, or how would you, what would be your recommendation for that, Adam?
Yeah, so I actually wrote an article about this a couple of years ago on mcpmag.com, I believe. And what I recommended was you could use, if you're in an Active Directory environment, I use group policy to do it. And you can use PowerShell to upgrade PowerShell. It gets kind of, iffy on sometimes, but I use VBScript because the VBScript engine is on every Windows machine anyway. So you can run PowerShell as just a package like we normally deploy, but instead of deploying it with PowerShell, you could set up a GPO to then target a bunch of your machines and have a VBScript to actually execute that package and get it upgraded across. There's a lot of different ways. You can use a lot of different RMM tools to do that. Yeah, I used VBScript a lot, and I can share that. If you can hit me up on Twitter, or maybe we can get that into some notes or something, a blog post, I can share that link later.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. That's kind of like you talk about PowerShell upgrading PowerShell. That's kind of like the hammer trying to upgrade and improve the hammer, right? It doesn't.
Pretty much. It gets a little. Really it's like Inception,
Yeah, exactly. Well, again, I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. I think that's about all we have time for today. I want to thank everybody for attending today. Hope you got some great information about this, some information that you could take back to your own organizations and get some value out of. I got some resources up on this page for you. We've got a link to all 3 of our blogs, including the new MSP Dojo, some link to our social accounts. And again, if you want some more information on our MSP offering, got that link down there at the bottom. Also want to say thanks to you, Adam, for coming and taking the time to talk to us today. You've been fantastic, gave us a lot of great information, so thank you for that. And again, everyone, want to say thanks for attending and hope to see you here for another Altero sponsored webinar at some point. Have a great day. Thank you.